Cerebral lobes. In this presentation, I am going to be showing and speaking about the functions of the four different cerebral lobes, which are the frontal, temporal, parietal, and occipital. I'm also going to be talking about the meninges and the CSF, which is the cerebral spinal fluid. To start off, I am going to be speaking about the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is the region of the cerebral cortex directly beneath the frontal lobe of the cranium. The frontal lobe is responsible for motor functions from planning movements through executing commands to be sent to the spinal cord and periphery. The most anterior portion of the frontal lobe is the prefrontal cortex, which is associated with aspects of personality through its influence on motor responses and decision making. So, to the bottom right, I placed the image and it shows exactly the location of the frontal lobe, which is obviously the front of the brain, the front portion, and its main function is action. So like it lists everything. It ranges from like planning, problem solving, judgment, choice making, Next, I'm going to be talking about the temporal lobe. The temporal lobe is the region of the cerebral cortex directly beneath the temporal lobe of the cranium. Temporal bone. The temporal lobe contains the cortical area for auditory processing, but also has regions crucial for memory formation. Structures in the temporal lobe are responsible for establishing long-term memory, but the ultimate location of those memories is usually in the region in which the sensory perception was processed. The temporal lobe is associated with primary auditory sensation known as Brodmann's areas 41 and 42 in the superior temporal lobe. Because regions of the temporal lobe are part of the limbic system, memory is an important function associated with that lobe. Memory is largely a function of the temporal lobe, along with structures beneath the cerebral cortex such as the hippocampus and the amygdala. The storage of memory requires these structures of the medial temporal lobe, a famous case of a man who had both medial temporal lobes removed to treat intractable epilepsy provided insight into the relationship between the structures of the brain and the function of memory. So as you can see on the bottom right, I have a image that I included in this presentation, and it shows exactly where the temporal lobe is, which is the bottom of the portion of the brain. And it also tells you its function, which is obviously auditory, so like hearing the sounds and analyzing them, and the recognition of the sounds. Next one is parietal lobe. Parietal lobe is the region of the cerebral cortex directly beneath the parietal bone of the cranium, which is like the top portion of the brain, kind of toward the middle, but more towards the back, since the front one is the frontal and it's bigger. The main sensation associated with the parietal lobe is somatosensation, meaning the general sensations associated with the body. The parietal lobe is where somatosensation is processed. It is vital for sensory perception and integration, including the management of taste, hearing, sight, touch, and smell. It is home to the brain's primary sensory area, a region where the brain interprets input from other areas of the body. So like understanding language and basically having to do with like the five senses, so like touch, pain, pressure. So that's it for the parietal lobe. Next and final lobe is the occipital lobe, which is the region of the cerebral cortex directly beneath the occipital bone of the cranium. The occipital lobe is where visual processing begins. Although the other parts of the brain can contribute to visual function, The occipital lobe is related to perception and processing the visual info, as well as the organization of complex process of visual perception. It also receives incoming information, and then after it's processed, it's sent to the hippocampus, where it's formed and stored for memory. It's turned into memory. So that's for like the main function is visual, and that will be on the very back of the brain and head towards the bottom. The meninges are protective outer coverings of the CNS composed of connective tissue, and it's also it can be a fluid-filled sac of the connective tissues that cover the spinal cord, and it's also known as the outer surface of the CNS, covered by a series of membranes composed of connective tissue, and it protects the brain. The CSF, as known as the cerebrospinal fluid, is the circulatory medium with the CNS that is produced by ependymal cells in the choroid plexus, filtering the blood, and it's the fluid that circulates through the CNS. It circulates throughout it and around it. So the cerebrospinal fluid in the brain, it's produced in the special structures to perfuse through the nervous tissue of the CNS, and it continues with the interstitial fluid, filters the blood and the membrane known as the choroid plexus. And on the bottom right, I have an image included, and that is pretty much it